News 9 Plus. Download now.
Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning into News 9 Live. I'm Kabir Naqvi and we're bringing you this special broadcast of top stories from our studios here in the National Capital, styled exclusively by none other than Paul Moll, ladies and gentlemen. A long list of stories for all of us to cover. Why 2023 is going to be one of the hottest year. And why I'm talking about that is because today it rained in the National Capital, that very severe air quality index. There's a slight little improvement over there, right ahead of the festivities of Diwali as well. Apart from that, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he was in Udaipur speaking to a public rally, addressed a gathering. We'll bring you the main pointers of that. Apart from that, Mahua Moitra, the ethics panel has adopted that report. So what does it mean for the cash for query case and its surrounding barbs against Mahua Moitra? But first and foremost, we're going to shift our focus to West Asia, 35 days of the conflict between Israel and Hamas. The latest from the war front. It has been over a month since Hamas initiated that deadly war against southern Israel, resulting in the deaths of about 1,400 people and the abduction of over 220 Israeli individuals and soldiers as hostages. Since then, Israel has been conducting airstrikes, ground operations, bombardments, you name it, across the Gaza Strip. Let's take you through the latest updates as of day 35. Now, topmost point to be noted today is that Israel has agreed for a 4-hour daily pause in military operations in Gaza. Now, Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, he's come out and said that 4-hour pauses will not affect our very own war efforts across the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, at least 10,800 Palestinians have been killed, out of which nearly 4,500 are children. Israel's war could set Gaza and the West Bank economy back by decades, a regression that has been unprecedented. This coming out according to the United Nations report. Meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu, he's come out and said, people are talking about political convenience and how I want this war to go on, but I'm not seeking to govern Gaza, is what Benjamin Netanyahu says. This, even as Houthis launch a batch of ballistic missiles towards various targets in Israel. Another report that has been confirmed by the IDF, even as that battle now hinges on with Houthis in Yemen and Hezbollah in Lebanon, even as the fight against Hamas carries on. In terms of humanitarian aid, several parties have been meeting up. There's a Gaza summit that happened in Egypt, there's a Gaza summit that happened in Paris, and there's a Gaza summit that's going to take place in Saudi Arabia as well. Meanwhile, France is hosting a week-long international humanitarian conference on Gaza. This is happening in Paris. Some 80 countries and international organizations met in Paris yesterday to coordinate aid and assess how to help the wounded in the Palestinian enclave of Gaza. Although expectations for concrete results are low without some pause in fighting. This even has some good news about 4-hour daily pauses in Israel's ground operations. Now, France offered support for Israel after the deadly October 7th attack by Hamas, yet Israel's retaliatory bombardment has raised concerns as civilian casualties have certainly soared. Thousands have been killed, wounded and displaced in Gaza. Visuals of all the eminent leaders that arrived in Paris yesterday for that week-long Gaza summit. The Palestinian Authority's Prime Minister was also present at the conference, but Israel was not invited. Now, French officials said that Israel was being kept informed of the developments, however, even in their absence. The conference brings together regional stakeholders in the shape of Egypt, Jordan and the Gulf of Arab countries, as well as the Western powers and G20 members, except for Russia. Now, international institutions and non-governmental organizations operating in Gaza, such as Doctors Without Borders, are also going to be in attendance over the week. Few heads of state, government or foreign ministers are present, and NGOs have been critical that there is not more pressure at the conference for a ceasefire. French officials hope it will lay the groundwork for a swift international response when there is an actual pause in the fighting. There will be some effort to mobilize financial resources, with several sectors identified for emergency support based on the UN assessments of the $1.1 billion of immediate needs and the opening of strictly humanitarian crossing points in Gaza. Ursula von der Leyen, head of the European Union, over there as well. Now, France is due to announce an increase in its commitments. Meanwhile, re-establishing the supply of water, fuel and electricity is going to be under discussion, while ensuring accountability processes to ensure aid was not diverted to Hamas in the Gaza Strip. There was a discussion also to set up a maritime corridor to use sea lanes to ship humanitarian aid into Gaza and see how ships could be used to help evacuate the wounded as well. A lengthy conference that's on in Paris.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, President Macron, thank you for hosting this conference. We are here to support civilians in Gaza. Of course, nothing justifies the abhorrent acts of terror by Hamas in Israel on 7 October, which I utterly condemned. Israelis and others were brutally killed or abducted, and I call once again for the unconditional return of all hostages. Now, civilians in Gaza, including children and women, face a never-ending humanitarian nightmare. Their neighborhoods wiped out, their loved ones killed, bombs raining down while being denied life's very basics: food, water, medicine, electricity. Some life-saving aid is beginning to trickle into Gaza, but let's face it, it's a drop in the ocean. The needs are enormous. We must step up to assist and protect civilians in Gaza. That means an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. It means ensuring full respect of international humanitarian law. It means protecting hospitals, UN facilities, shelters and schools. It means unfettered, safe and sustained access to bring and distribute supplies at much greater scale, volume and frequency, including fuel. And it means investing in the $1.2 billion humanitarian appeal that the United Nations has just launched to help the people of Gaza. I urge your support. Now is the time for concrete action. Together, we can help ease this terrible human suffering. We can help civilians in Gaza see at last, and at the very least, a glimmer of hope, a sign of solidarity, and a signal that the world sees their plight and cares enough to act.
Well, now, even as Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, thanked French President Emmanuel Macron for hosting that particular summit, the French President himself has said that there is a need for humanitarian pause, that too very quickly in Gaza. Macron said that, quote unquote, civilians must be protected, that's indispensable and non-negotiable, and is an immediate necessity as well. Now, Macron made this statement at the humanitarian conference on Gaza in Paris. He's also said that France is going to increase the aid for Palestinians to 100 million euros.
Aujourd'hui, la situation est grave et se dégrade chaque jour davantage. Dans l'immédiat, c'est à la protection des civils qu'il nous faut travailler. Il faut pour cela une pause humanitaire très rapide et il nous faut œuvrer à un cessez-le-feu. Celui-ci doit pouvoir devenir possible. Et dans l'objectif qu'au-delà du drame que vivent aujourd'hui de trop nombreuses familles israéliennes et palestiniennes. Or, nous partageons des valeurs et avons des engagements communs qui nous amènent aujourd'hui, d'accord avec les autorités israéliennes et palestiniennes, à nous préoccuper de la situation humanitaire à Gaza. Les civils doivent être protégés. Et c'est absolument indispensable. Ce n'est pas négociable. C'est une nécessité immédiate.
Meanwhile, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, said that the war crimes have been committed by both Israel and Hamas in the ongoing conflict. He said that Hamas's October 7th attack was a war crime, but he also added that the collective punishment of Palestinians by Israel in Gaza is in fact a war crime as well.
Rafah crossing has been the symbolic lifeline for the last month for the 2.3 million in Gaza. The lifeline has been unjustly, outrageously thin. These are the gates to a living nightmare. A nightmare where people have been suffocating under persistent bombardment, mourning their families, struggling for water, for food, for electricity.
All global leaders are talking about this living nightmare. But few details are known of the Israeli military's ground operations as it pushes deeper into Gaza. Fighting Hamas, a smaller group of foreign journalists was given a rare view of Israel's invasion on the shattered fringes of the Gaza city as well.
It's a workshop for weapons.
Lieutenant Colonel Ido is talking to a Reuters journalist on the shattered fringes of Gaza City. Few details are known of the Israeli military's ground operations as it pushes deeper into Gaza, fighting Hamas. Reuters was part of a small group of foreign journalists given rare but brief access to its troops. It only lasted an hour and a half, and on the condition that any footage recorded was reviewed by the Israeli army, although no footage was removed. Ido is only the officer's first name. They didn't give his name in full. He's just shown what he says was 2 floors of Hamas weapons workshops hidden underneath a small family apartment. This is a child's room.
From houses like this, 1,500 Israelis were murdered or slaughtered. It's been a long 2 weeks of fighting. It's not an operation, it's a war. It's going to last time. It's going to take its time. Until Hamas no longer exists, we're trying not to harm innocent people. We give all the people who live here a good heads up that we're coming. They need to evacuate till the Gaza Lake, which is going south. So we know that every people that are here are our enemy. We have not seen any civilians here, only Hamas.
Ido says the workshop weapons included drones, seen here in these boxes, although Reuters couldn't verify what was made in the ruined building. All of the buildings here are ruined, every one in sight. Dirt mounds have been pushed up by the military to give protection to army vehicles parked around them. Many vehicles also have this sturdy metal rigging mounted on top to protect against those drones. The message that they're not trying to harm civilians is consistent. This soldier has been here longer than some others.
I was one of the first soldiers that came in this neighborhood. And yes, when we came in, we weren't shooting when we just came in. We were getting shot at. They were shooting at us. So we had to shoot back to protect our lives. I'll tell you something. The Israeli army is here to protect innocent people.
These were civilians fleeing the city in video obtained by Reuters. Gaza's health authorities, which are run by Hamas, say over 10,000 Palestinians have been killed in the conflict, and 40% of those children. The U.S. government, Israel's biggest ally, has recently put the number in the thousands without giving specific numbers. Reports of close fighting deep in the city has coincided with footage like this of Hamas fighters, which Reuters could not verify either. The Israeli military says it's allowing humanitarian pauses in the fighting at specific times to allow more civilians to flee.
Well, meanwhile, even as we were showing you how the Reuters journalists were given a rare glimpse of what the fighting inside Gaza looks like, Reuters has denied suggestions by media advocacy group Honest Reporting that it and other international news organizations had no prior knowledge of the October 7th attacks by Hamas. The Israeli government demanded explanation from Reuters and 3 other news groups regarding the Honest Reporting article, which questioned their work with Gaza-based photojournalists during the Hamas's assault. Now, Honest Reporting, a self-proclaimed charitable organization, stated on its website that it aims to address ideological bias in journalism and media, particularly concerning its impact on Israel. The organization clarified that it wasn't making accusations of collusion, but rather raising ethical concerns about news coverage in general. Reuters acquired photographs from 2 Gaza-based freelance photographers who were present at the border on the morning of October 7th, with whom it had no prior affiliation. So Reuters coming out and saying, well, we had no knowledge about the October 7th attacks. Meanwhile, take a look at this. Saudi Arabia is also going to join that list of places that are now going to be holding summits on Gaza. Saudi Arabia will host summits of Arab and Islamic nations, including Iran, in the coming weekend to discuss the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The meeting aims to find a framework to stop the war in Gaza. The back-to-back summits in Riyadh could signal the start of a higher-profile diplomatic push, with Saudi Arabia taking advantage of its position as a historic champion of Palestinians, combined with its interest in potentially recognizing Israel one day and undercutting the Iranian influence in the region as well. Now, the United Nations has said that the conflict in Gaza is a wildfire that could spread across the region. UNA Chief Martin Griffiths said that allowing the situation to continue in the enclave would be, quote-unquote, a travesty. Listen in to what he had to say.
The situation is, very simply put, it is insupportable, and to allow it to continue would be a travesty. War, indeed, is a virus that always wants to expand. Then the current conflict is a wildfire that could consume the region, that could spread, and that we will think these have been the good days when we see what may happen tomorrow. The United Nations cannot be part of a unilateral proposal to push hundreds of thousands of desperate civilians in Gaza into so-called safe zones. We cannot be part of this. It is cessation of fighting, a silencing of the guns for humanitarian purposes. There's been a lot of discussion about the value of pauses, and I'm not one to deny the value of pauses, but that is not the same as a ceasefire, as you mentioned also, Mr. President, which provides a sense of continuity to allow precisely for the revival of services, the entry of the private sector, and the possibility of the people of Gaza to breathe and consider that they will have a future.
Even as back-to-back meetings are slated to take place in Riyadh, we already saw what's happened in Egypt over that Gaza summit and a week-long conference that's taking place in Paris as well. Let's show you what's happening on the other side. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with, his war cabinet. He's convened a war management cabinet in Jerusalem. Among the prominent participants in the gathering were M.K. Aryeh Deri, the head of the Mossad, and the Shin Bet, the head of the Himlal, and member Gadi Eisenkot, and Minister Benny Gantz, who was also part of the war cabinet. The visuals on your screen are coming from the war cabinet that's taking place. But that's not all. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, he also met with Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte on Wednesday at Netanyahu's office in Jerusalem. Now, according to Israel's government press office, Netanyahu thanked Rutte for his friendship and support that is helping Israel during the time of war. This is the second visit for Rutte to Israel since the Israel Hamas war. And to the extreme west, more than 1,500 pro-Palestinian protesters called for a ceasefire in Gaza right on the steps of the New York Public Library in Midtown Manhattan on Thursday.
Now, and all U.S. funding for Israel and lift the siege on Gaza now. Now is the moment for the world to take action against the genocide of Palestinians. Our struggle is 75 years in the making, and our victory is inevitable.
I stand here in my coolly given white privilege to say that you don't have to be Palestinian to stand with the Palestinian people. You do not have to be Palestinian to understand that the slaughter of almost 5,000 children is unacceptable and a war crime.
Meanwhile, United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken, he has arrived in the national capital, Delhi, primarily to attend the India-US 2+2 dialogue, Foreign and Defense Ministerial Dialogue. Now, the 2+2 dialogue will take place today. United States Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, he's already reached Delhi earlier. Now, the top diplomat of the United States, Antony Blinken, he's made its way to the national capital. The Indian side of the dialogue will be led by Defense Minister Rajnath Singh and External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar. Now, the two sides would also discuss the Indo-Pacific region, Russia and Ukraine, along with other bilateral issues. Now, Delhi is part of the Quad Alliance as well, alongside United States, Australia and Japan. Antony Blinken, he's made his way to Delhi after making a quick stop in Japan as well. A grouping, talking about Quad here, a grouping that positions itself as a bulwark against China's growing assertiveness in the Asia-Pacific region. Now, Washington hopes a tighter defense relationship will help wean India off Russia, New Delhi's primary military supplier. Blinken arrived in New Delhi late on Thursday from South Korea, the latest leg of a marathon trip that has included a G7 foreign ministers' meeting in Japan, which sought to find common ground on the Gaza conflict, and a whirlwind tour of West Asia. China and the West Asian conflict, these are going to be primarily spoken about as well.
As part of the 2+2 security dialogue with Secretary Austin, and so I have no doubt deepening our security cooperation will be a topic that is discussed by Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin, and their counterparts in the Ministry of External Affairs and Ministry of Defense. I will let that trip play out before we share further, but I have no doubt that cooperation, especially in the counterterrorism space, is something that will come up in areas where we can potentially deepen our partnership.
So a 2+2 dialogue led by External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh with their counterparts Antony Blinken and Austin J. Lloyd respectively. Now, it's going to be important to see what really comes out of this particular 2+2 dialogue. There's going to be joint press conferences as well. On the microblogging website X, spokesperson for the Ministry of External Affairs of India, Arindam Bagchi, he said a warm welcome to the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken as he arrives in New Delhi to co-chair the 5th India-US 2+2 Ministerial Dialogue. The visit is going to further boost India-US comprehensive global strategic partnership, something that was spoken very highly about when Prime Minister Narendra Modi went on that official full-blown state visit to the United States. Lots more that's going to come in the day-to-day, even as External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and his counterpart Antony Blinken over there in the same screen. The 2+2 dialogue begins today.
So there's a lot of bilateral stuff we need to do. And two, of course, this is the
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Are we supposed to say something? Okay. So, Secretary Blinken, Tony, let me welcome you. This is your third visit this year? That sounds right. And of course, we've been meeting elsewhere. But this meeting, this visit of yours, I think has a particular significance because one,
well, a little glimpse of what this 2+2 dialogue is essentially going to be looking like. We're going to play those reactions as soon as we get them. Meanwhile, a precursor to this meeting, concluding a two-day meeting in Tokyo, Antony Blinken stated that there is a potential for a transitional phase regarding post-conflict governance in Gaza. He emphasized that Hamas cannot continue to govern Gaza and Israel cannot maintain its occupation of the territory.
We had in-depth discussions about the steps that we are taking to address urgent needs on the ground. We all agreed that humanitarian pauses would advance key objectives: to protect Palestinian civilians, to increase the sustained flow of humanitarian assistance, to allow our citizens and foreign nationals to exit, and to facilitate the release of hostages. When it comes to post-conflict governance in Gaza, a few things are clear and necessary. One, Gaza cannot continue to be run by Hamas. That simply invites a repetition of October 7th, and Gaza used as a place from which to launch terrorist attacks. It's also clear that Israel cannot occupy Gaza. What I've heard from Israeli leaders is that they have no intent to reoccupy Gaza and retake control of Gaza. So the only question is there some transition period that might be necessary, and what might be the mechanisms that you could put in place for that to make sure that there is security.
Well, meanwhile, an explosion was heard in close proximity to Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital in the early hours of Friday. People gathered outside the hospital entrance in Gaza City, and there was shouting that could be heard. People were seen fleeing from the site as well. Meanwhile, shifting our focus to some stories from back home, Prime Minister Narendra Modi criticized Rajasthan's Congress government, accusing the party of supporting terrorism, allowing groups like PFI to rally freely. Now, Modi claimed the government's appeasement approach endangered Rajasthan's culture, mentioning the ban of Kanwad Yatra and Ram Navami procession. Asserting a BJP government is vital for development, he pledged a third term after the 2024 elections.
उदयपुर में कन्हैयालाल जी के साथ आतंकी घटना कांग्रेस सरकार पर बहुत बड़ा दाग है। ऐसी जघन्य वारदात उदयपुर में इसलिए हुई क्योंकि यहां आतंकियों के साथ सहानुभूति रखने वाली कांग्रेस की सरकार है। साथियों, कांग्रेस सरकार की तुष्टीकरण की नीति ने राजस्थान की संस्कृति, राजस्थान की विरासत, राजस्थान के गौरव को खतरे में डाल दिया है। जैसे हालात राजस्थान में पहले कभी नहीं बने, वो पिछले 5 साल में हमने देखे हैं। किसने सोचा था कि राजस्थान में कभी रामनवमी की शोभा यात्रा और कांवड़ यात्रा पर भी प्रतिबंध लग सकता है। लेकिन ये पाप कांग्रेस सरकार ने किया है। क्या ऐसी कांग्रेस सरकार को राजस्थान में रहने देना चाहिए? ऐसी कांग्रेस को राजस्थान में जगह मिलनी चाहिए? आज यहां कांग्रेस सरकार है, इसलिए पीएफआई जैसे आतंकी संगठन बेखौफ होकर रैलियां निकालते हैं, आतंकियों की हमदर्द कांग्रेस सरकार राजस्थान को तबाह करके मानेगी। क्या हम राजस्थान को तबाह होने देंगे? क्या हम राजस्थान को तबाह होने देंगे? क्या हम राजस्थान को बर्बाद होने देंगे? राजस्थान के कितने ही क्षेत्रों में अब गरीबों के पलायन की खबरें आने लगी है। राजस्थान में कांग्रेस सरकार रही तो ये और भी बढ़ेगा। इसलिए अब राजस्थान को देर नहीं करनी है। 25 नवंबर को पूरे उदयपुर को, पूरे राजस्थान को इस संकल्प के साथ बोलने के लिए निकलना है कि कांग्रेस सरकार को अब हटा करके ही रहेंगे।
Delhi's air quality index in the latest updates, even as the national capitals fared slightly better today. Some positive news on the air quality index front. Several parts of Delhi-NCR received light rainfall on the intervening night of Thursday and Friday, bringing a much-needed respite from the increased air pollution in the national capital. Yet, the national capital's air quality index stood at 407 at about 6 a.m. today, as per the data by the System of Air Quality and Weather Forecasting and Research, also called SAFAR. Now, these showers in several places is going to reduce the amount of suspended particulate matter in the air, that is PM 2.5 and PM 10, and hence will improve air quality. Take a look at that. That's the same spot from yesterday and today. A slight improvement, yet the air quality index continues to be in the severe category. Detailed comparison right in front of your eyes. Now, this came amid the Delhi government's ongoing efforts to implement the idea of artificial rain through cloud seeding, which will be attempted around the 20th of November to curtail pollution situation in the city. Currently, stage 4 of the graded response action plan has been implemented in the national capital after the city's air quality plummeted to the severe plus category. The air quality index in Ashok Vihar was at 462, in R.K. Puram at 461, in Punjabi Bagh at 460, and in ITO at 464. Now, amid high pollution levels in the national capital, the Delhi Traffic Police issued over 1,300 challans in a single day to vehicle owners driving without PUC certificates. So, light rainfall in the national capital. Meanwhile, the AQI is set to improve over the course of the day, but currently it still stands in the severe category. Ahead of festivities, a fresh of breath air maybe. Meanwhile, parliamentary politics. The Ethics Committee of the Lok Sabha has recommended by a majority of 6-4 the expulsion of TMC MP Mahua Moitra from the House. The panel, which met here, will send its recommendation to Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla as well. The Speaker may allow a debate on the panel's report once it is tabled in the House in the next session of Parliament. The government may then move a motion to expel Mahua Moitra from the Lok Sabha. The panel, that is led by BJP MP Vinod Kumar Sonkar, had heard Moitra earlier. BJP MP Nishikant Dubey, who filed the complaint against her, and Advocate Jay Anant Dehadrai, all of them were heard by Sonkar. Now, Moitra is accused of asking questions in the Lok Sabha to target the Adani Group and Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the behest of a businessman, Darshan Hiranandani, in exchange for gifts. Mahua Moitra has come out and openly denied this charge. The Lok Sabha Ethics Committee cited the threats India faces from state and non-state cyber actors to indict Trinamool Congress Member of Parliament Mahua Moitra for sharing her login credentials with the businessman noting that he has residency rights in Dubai and has close relatives who are foreign nationals. Now, this creates a serious risk of leakage of sensitive material to foreign agencies. This is the statement that has come out by the panel as it concluded its probe. Now, 5 opposition members of parliament have submitted dissent notes against the adoption of a report by the Lok Sabha Ethics Committee recommending the expulsion of the Trinamool member of parliament, alleging that it was erroneous and framed purely for political reasons. Meanwhile, reacting to the latest developments, the TMC leader termed it as a prefixed match by a kangaroo court and emphasized that it signifies, quote unquote, death of parliamentary democracy in India. Stories about climate change coming up next. Now, residents of Kenya's Garissa have been displaced from their homes amid heavy flooding that has inundated towns across East Africa. Somalia's National Disaster Management Agency said on Wednesday that 29 people had also died and more than 3 lakh were forced to flee their homes.
Kenya's Garissa is underwater. People here displaced from their homes amid the heavy rains that have inundated towns across East Africa. This is resident Abdallah Dulo.
Our houses have been demolished, our farms are flooded, our chicken and goats have drowned. Our cooking pans, mattresses, seats, overall we've lost many things because of the floods.
In Kenya, the floods have killed at least 15 people, according to the Kenya Red Cross. Red Cross Regional Coordinator Mohammed Abdul Qadir says the situation is dire.
There is an urgent need for humanitarian support because there are displacement, there are areas which are cut off, and this is a rain that has rained all over the region, not a specific place.
Somalia's National Disaster Management Agency said on Wednesday that 29 people there had also died, and more than 300,000 forced to flee their homes. The regional deluge has been caused by the combined effect of 2 weather phenomena, El Niño and the Indian Ocean Dipole, said Nazanin Mashiri, a climate analyst at the International Crisis Group. Those climate patterns impact ocean surface temperatures and cause above-average rainfall.
Meanwhile, a report on climate change claims that 2023, this year, is guaranteed to be the hottest year on record due to unprecedented temperature anomalies.
October 2023 was the warmest October on record globally, with an average surface temperature of 15.3 degrees Celsius. What this means is this last month was 0.85 degrees Celsius above the recent average, and ever had a bigger difference between the previous warmest month and the current one is last month in September. So October 2023 is almost as shocking as September 2023 was.
Meanwhile, what's even worrying is that back in 2015, South Africa had pledged emission cuts at the Paris Climate Summit. Now, it's set to miss the 2030 targets due to bureaucratic delays and a power crisis at Eskom. The nation aimed to reduce emissions from 442 million to 350 to 420 million metric tons by decommissioning coal plants. Similar setbacks are seen globally with Canada, ExxonMobil, and Shell backtracking on climate commitments.
This was the Paris Climate Summit in 2015, when South Africa was among nations pledging to reduce their emissions. Now the world's 11th biggest greenhouse gas emitter is set to miss those legally binding targets, 3 senior government officials have confirmed. Under the Paris Climate Accords, South Africa vowed to cut emissions to between 350 and 420 million metric tons by 2030. That's from 442 million in 2020. To achieve this, it plans to decommission 8 coal-fired power plants. However, switching to a renewable energy policy has been hampered by bureaucratic delays. And then there's the power crisis at state-owned utility Eskom. South Africa has been suffering blackouts of sometimes up to 10 hours a day for the past 18 months. That now makes the emissions target unrealistic, said the officials who declined to be named because the information is not yet public. The Environment Ministry said the country remained committed to achieving its Paris Agreement commitments and that it was too early to say the 2030 targets would be missed. In August, however, the Electricity Minister said the decommissioning of power plants must be delayed, given the power crisis which he described as of existential proportions. But South Africa is not alone. Several wealthy countries and companies have been backtracking on climate pledges. That includes Canada, which has said it will miss its 2030 targets. Global oil and gas giants ExxonMobil and Shell have either delayed or abandoned shifting to renewables. On Wednesday, the United Nations said fossil fuel output by 2030 will be more than double levels consistent with the 2015 Paris climate goals.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Top Stories. All the latest updates continue on the other side. Don't go anywhere.